Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to part 2 of my Joseph Losey season. Today we're going to discuss a film from 1950, The Lawless. This is a Spanish double feature DVD, along with Time Without Pity, which we'll get to later. This DVD actually has a nice little booklet with essays, granted they're in Spanish. There's actually some nice still pictures. That's from Time Without Pity. There's one of the lead characters from The Lawless. So it's actually a nice little booklet that if you speak Spanish you'll get more out of than I do, but it's actually a nice little booklet you don't necessarily expect with a double feature DVD. So Losey was out of his RKO contract, so this film was made by Paramount, and he was kind of, somebody had him in mind due to the subject matter. Again, it's funny looking back on Losey's career and knowing what happened to him and where his politics lie. It is funny because the first two films are right up his street, because this one is about mob mentality and media circus and witch hunts. So strangely enough, that's right in Losey's wheelhouse in the following years of his life and career. This stars MacDonald Carey, who you'll probably recognise his face, and Gail Russell, who, according to the book that I showed in the intro to this series, never really wanted to be an actor and needed some alcoholic help to get her through some scenes in the film. The film is about kind of migrant fruit pickers, or fruit tramps as the Anglo-Americans call them, and it focuses on a couple of friends, but really focuses on one character, Paul, who lost his brother, who died at Normandy, and the Latino workers are looked down on by the Anglos and called names. And there's an area of the town, Santa Mara, which again is one of those little Invasion of the Body Snatcher type towns. Even though the sign says the friendly city, it doesn't quite. That's obviously an ironic signpost. And they have an area called Sleepy Hollow, bizarrely. And they arrange a dance to kind of mend fences, but it turns into a mass brawl where the white kids who don't look like the fruit tramps start a fight. Paul accidentally hits a police officer, and that leads to a chase where he steals an ice cream cart, and then a car eventually gets caught, gets beaten up a bit by the police officer that he hit, and on the way back to the station, the officer's getting a bit too frisky with him in the back, and the officer that's driving the car gets distracted. They go down a ravine, the car bursts into flames, the driver is killed, and then Paul is on the run again, and that leads to a huge manhunt that is whipped up by the media. A young girl is her dog gets agitated, so she follows him into a barn where Paul is hiding. Paul comes out, she turns round in quite hilarious slapstick fashion and knocks herself out on a beam of wood. But again, the media makes that out that Paul attacked her. So the town is whipped up into this frenzy by the media, by the hatred of outsiders, these fruit tramps. And it ends up in a huge riot, which is wonderfully shot. Losey was a big fan of the riot scenes in Fritz Lang's Fury. And MacDonald Carey stars as a newspaper reporter who is kind of retired from the big time. He just wants to find a nice little small town where he can write stories about burning leaves in the fall. He's done taking sides, and Gail Russell plays a character who wants him to take sides. She's very much on the side of these migrant workers. Losey already at this stage was having trouble with the producers, two producers that were legendary for being monsters, basically. Losey wasn't a fan of the script. Again, one of Losey's issues was that he never wrote scripts, so he was pretty much had to deal with the script that he had, which he didn't really like. It does kind of make obvious points, and the MacDonald Carey, you could argue, is perhaps a little bit too old for the role and is a little bit miscast. The producers also wanted the score, which again is the typical kind of Hollywood late 40s, 50s kind of score, which is a bit unnecessary, but there are times where the score's dropped out to the kind of betterment of the film. But again, Losey still makes this an energetic film after the kind of stage-bound and studio-bound setting of The Boy with Green Hair, which Losey wasn't a big fan of. He gets to shoot in locations and he does really good work in locations. The manhunt scene is a wonderful scene in a quarry and kind of a chase along a riverbed, which is really effective. Again, the scenes where the mob breaks into the paper where MacDonald Carey works, a paper called The Union, is really effectively done. Again, Losey got all these extras to go wild, didn't actually tell them what the film was about, and just told them to go wild. There's really nice shots of like people essentially running over the camera on the ground and people running over it, which is really effective. It took 21 days to shoot, so really punchy, economic, as these films kind of had to be in those days. But again, he still makes great use of locations, really effective manhunt sequences. Even if the attack on the young girl is kind of hilarious, the way she just turns around and bonks herself in the head with a bit of wood. It's a good little film. Again, is it a wonderful film? Not really, but it's a solid piece of work. It also co-stars John Hoyt, which again you might not recognise the name, but you'll certainly recognise the face. He usually played mad doctors and villains, but here he plays the father of the main kind of Anglo son, who at first you kind of feel is just using his money. You know, he bails out his son and all the Anglo kids. You get the feeling he's a guy who just makes problems go away with money. But he does pay the Latino kids bail. And when MacDonald Carey wants to leave town because he's just had enough after the events, Hoyt is the one that tries to convince him to stay and start up his paper again. But again, knowing what happened to Losey, looking back on it, again, this is a film that is right in the wheelhouse of mob rule, and again, the media's role is really effectively shown as far as whipping up people. You know, the original kind of brawl at the dance is put into the headline Fruit Tramps Riot. It's built as a riot, and obviously as the kind of events that happen to Paul kind of escalate, he's built up into this super villain that is rampaging across the countryside. But of course, in the reality, he's just a scared kid whose circumstances have put him into a terrible position. And again, the mob scenes are really effectively done. It does have that danger to it, in that the idea of somebody will say something and then somebody will say, oh yeah, let's go and do that, and then all of a sudden there's like 50 people rampaging the newspaper offices, and then when they actually are broken up, it's always that kind of, well, how did that happen and why did we do that? We're normal people, we don't do that kind of thing, but as we all know, the mob mentality unfortunately is all too real. The herd mentality is all too real within human nature. So again, not the greatest film you're ever going to see, but it's a good solid little film with, again, wonderful use of location, and well worth a little look, but don't expect too much from it. But again, it has themes that, strangely enough, run through Losey's films already. We're 2 parts in and it's already about outsiders, people that are different, people that are vilified for one reason or another. So thanks very much for watching part 2 of Joseph Losey, The Lawless from 1950. Please let me know in the comments below if you've seen The Lawless and what you think of it, and hopefully you'll join me again for part 3. This is Solid Ronan from Solid Ronan Films, saying farewell.